what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And it is Thursday, October 19th, 2017, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and amazingly enough, I'm actually able to get Skype to work correctly where I can receive calls on this machine. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And it's still not getting our infrastructure off the hook because this morning when I got up to start updating the website, and I get up about 4 in the morning now, to start posting stories, and our local Spectrum net was down again. So it's almost like it's the days when everything is working together that are becoming an endangered species here. Anyway, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, and sure happy it's Thursday. Moving on here, this is the biggest story that's out there right now, and it should be the biggest story, and we, the American people, have to make it a big story because, with the exception of Fox News, corporate media is trying to ignore this completely. Oh, my, no, there's nothing there. Really, pay no attention to all that Russian money going into the Clinton Foundation, and so what if Russia has 20% of our uranium ore and they can make bombs with it? You guys are just making a big deal, a mountain out of a molehill. We have to talk about the NFL kneeling, and we have to talk about Weinstein, and mostly we have to talk about how Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. So, basically what's going on here, let me give you a recap of what's going on here. We've known about this here in the independent media for months now. And now all of a sudden it's breaking into what they used to call the mainstream, the corporate media. It started with a well-documented sourced article published by The Hill that basically took the information we've been talking about for months and they said, ooh, maybe we should be looking at this. So basically it is now indisputable that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's administration were in the middle of a massive bribery scheme involving those very same Russians that they're trying to claim are colluding with Donald Trump. So basically, in a nutshell, the Russian nuclear industry wanted to grab America's uranium. And to do that, they tried to purchase a Canadian company called Uranium One, because Uranium One had leaseholds on 20% of America's uranium reserves. Now, what the FBI had, they knew what was going on. They had an informant, a confidential witness that managed to infiltrate the Russian nuclear industry. They had an inside man. And for over 6 years, from 2009 to 2015, extensively documented via secret recordings, email intercepts, documents they was a copy, that it was a massive bribery, extortion, racketeering, and kickbacks involved with the Russian nuclear industry, Uranium One, and Hillary and Bill Clinton. And so what happened is, using envelopes that were stuffed with cash, suitcases stuffed with cash, buckets of cash, wire transfers worth tens of millions of dollars from secret bank accounts in places like Cyprus, Latvia, Switzerland, the Russians were able to basically buy off the entire board of Uranium One. Made them all very rich. Said, we're going to come on in and buy your company. And then out of the blue, several months before Hillary Clinton, who was then Barack Obama's Secretary of State, was supposed to make a decision whether to certify that the Russians can control 20% of America's uranium supply, guess what happened? 9 members of Uranium One's board of directors donated over $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. Not only that, direct payments were made to Bill Clinton in the form of speaking fees. Huge amounts of money for these speeches. Literally, basically just sending him the money. And as all of this was going on, we learned that the person who was overseeing this FBI sting operation was Rod Rosenstein, the very same guy who is now number 2 in the Department of Justice under Jeff Sessions. The same guy who authorized the special prosecutor to go after Donald Trump and the Russian collusion conspiracy theory for which there is still no evidence. And you know who else was overseeing the FBI investigation? then FBI Director Robert Mueller, who is now the special counsel going after Donald Trump. And it gets even worse. It has now come out top Obama administration officials also knew about the Russian bribery plot, including his Attorney General Eric Holder. And even though they knew that Hillary Clinton was in the middle of a massive bribery scheme involving influence peddling, racketeering, extortion, and so forth and so on, where the Russians had basically bought her husband Bill Clinton, and other U.S. officials to enable them to purchase 20% of America's uranium reserve, they all signed off on it. All of them did. They all signed off and said, yeah, we can go ahead with this. There's a committee called CFIUS. It's an interagency committee that is responsible for approving the sale of strategic American resources like, for example, uranium, which is a key element used in the development of nuclear weapons. And these guys have to sign off on any major sale to a foreign entity, such as the case with the Russian-owned Uranium One. Now take a load of this. Hillary Clinton, as Barack Obama's Secretary of State, presided over that board, CFIUS. Eric Holder sat on the board, together with Robert Mueller and Rob Rosenstein. They also approved the sale of American uranium to the Russians via Uranium One. They were in on the whole deal. They approved it and turned a blind eye. What Hillary Clinton did is a blatant violation of the law, the Foreign Corruption Practices Act. Rosenstein knows about it. So does Robert Mueller. So does Eric Holder. They had a legal obligation to inform Congress that Hillary and her husband were involved in a massive bribery scheme where they were pimping out American uranium to the Russians, and they said nothing. Now, they're all completely compromised, and they should be at the very least fired. And they went along with this apparently in the absolute sure and certain belief that Hillary Clinton was going to win the White House and they'd be safe for investigations. And that's why they all panicked when Donald Trump won the election. And that's why they've all gone on the attack against him. They're trying to attack Donald Trump and keep him so busy dodging Russian collusion investigations that he's not going to turn around and realize, hey, there was Russian collusion, but it was with Hillary and her people. Hillary needs to go to prison along with her husband Bill. Now, the FBI informant, via his lawyer, says he was explicitly threatened by the Obama administration high-ranking officials. If he sought to speak out, he was fearing for his life. That's how crooked it gets. And now Mueller and Rosenstein are investigating Donald Trump for an alleged collusion with Russia, when all roads from Russia lead to Hillary Clinton. When the only ones that were colluding with the Russians, taking money from the Russians, selling America to the Russians, were Hillary and her husband with the open knowledge and tacit support of the Obama administration, Attorney General Eric Holder, Mueller, and Rosenstein. And by the way, Andrew McCabe, former FBI Director James Comey's number 2, also knew about it and approved the sale of Uranium One to the Russians. And sooner or later, Comey's going to get dragged into this. He can't possibly be clean in all of this nonsense. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, this is a big story. This is a huge story. It's a huge scandal. This is bigger than Whitewater. It's bigger than Watergate. And the corporate media, with the exception of Fox News, the corporate media is absolutely pretending this does not exist. Except for the New York Post. You ought to see the cover on their latest newspaper. They got a graphic on there that just nails it. Banner headline, Quid Pro Dough. So, Congress is taking this up. They have to. Because right now, with much of America already aware of this scandal because of the independent media, now the credibility of the U.S. government as a whole is on the line. If they cover this up, if they put it off, if they hand out more get out of jail free cards, the American people are going to see that the entire government is hopelessly corrupt and should not be supported, should not be obeyed. Same thing with the corporate media. What little remains of their credibility is now on the line if they continue to try and stonewall this story. But this was a criminal enterprise, and they're trying to spin it by, oh, it was the bad old Russians who were doing this. Well, there's always going to be bribes offered out there. It's the people who accepted bribes that we have to punish. Now, fortunately, Trump seems to be on top of this story right now. He took to Twitter this morning and basically said, uranium deal to Russia with Clinton help and Obama administration knowledge is the biggest story fake media doesn't want to follow. And he's absolutely right. And if they don't start reporting on this story, all of America will see ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, they're all the fake media. So their credibility is on the line. The credibility of the U.S. government is on the line, unless they deal with this decisively and immediately. Story coming out of 12160.info. Documents show other Democrats, not just the Clintons, were on that Russian payroll. The money was just flowing to everybody for this deal. I mean, you realize what a strategic victory it was for Russia to gain control of 20% of America's uranium? That literally reshapes future nuclear weapons development. And now we begin to see why everybody was panicking so much when Donald Trump won the election last November. They all went along with this collusion. They all took the money. They all made themselves a little bit richer, and they all did nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, in the sure and certain belief Hillary was going to win the White House, and they would be safe from any possible investigations or repercussions. And it didn't work out that way, and that's why Hillary beat up John Podesta on election night. Well, she went on a week-long binge, and everybody's now on the attack mode against Donald Trump, because if he ever gets to stop and take a deep breath and look at what's going on, he's going to start from the top down and say, why aren't you prosecuting this? And if you're not going to prosecute this, you're fired. You're next in line. Are you going to prosecute this? No, you're fired. You're next in line. Are you going to prosecute this? Good. You've got the job. That's what's going on. And it's already having ripple effects because apparently right now there's a shakeup over at the Democratic National Committee. Several key longtime officials have lost their jobs, exposing a rift in the party and igniting anger among those in its progressive wing who see retaliation for their opposition to DNC Chairman Tom Perez. They still want Debbie Wasserman Schultz to be there, even though she's tarnished goods. So there's a lot of infighting going on here. And again, going on back, the FBI informant, who's not been named, confidential informant 1, was literally blocked by the Obama administration from testifying about the Uranium One deal, was literally threatened. Well, now Senator Grassley is saying we need to get past that. And he is seeking to formally lift any existing gag orders to interview the FBI informant regarding this case. Grassley's going after this. Okay. So Grassley's going to be looking at it. Trey Gowdy needs to look at this. Like I said, the credibility, the remaining credibility of the entire U.S. government is on the line here. If they give the Clintons a pass on this one, it's over for them. everybody will understand that the U.S. government as a whole, as an entity, is not about the Constitution, not about the rule of law, not about the American people, not about the American nation. It's just a bunch of thugs pretending to be a government and filling their own pockets. And already we're seeing indications our current administration is already compromised, because Attorney General Jeff Sessions is now saying that Rod Rosenstein can investigate himself in the Uranium One criminal probe. They've got his number somewhere. I mean, it's outrageous for the current Attorney General to defend the criminal actions of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and then turn around and say that one of the people suspected of collusion with Russia is allowed to investigate themselves. Yeah, I can just see Rosenstein getting up there and saying, "Yep, I'm guilty. Lock me up. Here, bring on the handcuffs. I'm guilty." That's ridiculous. That's like hiring Jeffrey Dahmer to investigate whether there's cannibalism in Milwaukee. Meanwhile, over at the House Intelligence Committee hearings, they're still trying to talk to the people who created that ridiculous Trump dossier that claimed Trump and two prostitutes were doing some really icky things in the presidential suite of the Moscow Hotel. And it turned out to be a total fabrication. Russia said, no, it didn't happen. Trump said it didn't happen. Nobody has any proof that it happened. Turned out the entire document was written by a former MI5 intelligence officer, Christopher Steele, at the behest of a company called Fusion, which is an opposition research company. Their job is to dig up dirt on people that you are opposing politically. And they've been asked to come on in and talk about just how it is this dossier came about. And at this point, they're ignoring the subpoena. They're basically pleading the Fifth Amendment, which is tantamount to admitting they did something wrong. Now, interestingly enough, there is a lawyer over in New York, Ty Clevenger, who's filed a bar grievance against James Comey, basically saying that Comey's testimony to Congress was belied by revelations, that he started drafting an exoneration letter months before even witnesses. Basically, Mr. Comey gave materially false testimony to Congress. It appears he violated several rules of the New York Rules of Professional Conduct. And so Mr. Clevenger is seeking the disbarment of James Comey. And he might actually get it. And I'm sure Comey really doesn't use his law license all that much, but it would be a major disgrace, a professional disgrace. But it does look more and more like the entire system really is corrupt, especially the liberal side here, because the Heritage Foundation is keeping tabs, their voter fraud database. They've now documented 1,088 proven instances of election fraud during last year's campaign, including 949 cases that have resulted in criminal convictions, 48 that have ended in civil penalties, and 75 that have seen defendants enter diversion programs. And you're not seeing that on the corporate media either, are you? And you should be alarmed, because Heritage has compiled so many examples of election fraud impacting nearly every state and elections for all levels of government. Because this figure is likely just the tip of the iceberg. Our election system is a joke. And Trump's Commission on Election Integrity needs to deal with this decisively, just as Trump needs to deal decisively with the recent Russia revelations, which aren't all that recent. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Somebody just sent in a little message over my chat page pointing something out that is actually quite valid. It could be considered, if you look at all the Russia bashing that's been going on, where they're trying to cast Russia as our enemy, and now we find out Hillary Clinton was enabling that enemy to buy American uranium, 20% of our reserves, it could be considered an act of treason. It's certainly an act of corruption. It's a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Services Act. And all of these media outlets that are aware of this story, because it's been in the independent media for months now, and they refuse to report it, they are technically guilty of misprision of whatever crimes Hillary Clinton is ultimately convicted of. Now remember, corporate law protects the private finances of the corporate officials from the vicissitudes of business, but it can't protect them in the event of an illegal action. If these media executives made a conscious decision to protect Hillary Clinton from the consequences of her actions, they are accessories after the fact, and they should go to jail. And that is a legitimate concern. And by the way, we just posted up that new Project Veritas video where they have one of the top people at the New York Times admitting to open political bias. And I understand editors have a bias here, but when you have a media that is refusing to report on the actual commission of crimes, when they spend all their time talking about rumors of a link between Trump and Russia for which there's no evidence, while ignoring the links between Hillary and Russia for which there's copious amounts of documented proof, that's more than just bias. That does make them a willing accomplice to the crimes of the Clintons, and they should go to jail right alongside them. Or at least get a good coating of tar and feathers here. We're going to take a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Hey, Mike. A week ago, remember when I had an explosion in Ukraine where the second time or third time where the ammo depot? I mean, I'm Ukrainian, but I said, well, it's the Ukrainians, they're smoking or whatever, or a show. Mike, I'm Ukrainian. I love Russia. I love the U.S., but this whole Russia bashing thing's got to stop. There's nobody who was going to invest 20% in this uranium company because the uranium company might have not been doing very well. So the Russians invested in this U.S. company, right? It didn't leave the U.S. But it just seems like it's a ping-pong ball back and forth, right? Like between oligarch, Republican, Democrat. There's nothing there. You know that. There's nothing there, but the problem is like, it's a constant Russia bashing, and like, it's gonna lead us to a world war, Mike, because like, it's just, they're trying to blame somebody else for our internal problems.
Yes, absolutely.
And all the wars that we've fought.
They blame Russia for absolutely everything, and here's where it's going to come back to haunt Hillary and her people, because those members of the American population who have bought into the Russia bashing, they're going to look at this revelation that Hillary Clinton was doing business with Russia, and they're going to see it in an even more negative light than they might otherwise have done if this Russia bashing campaign had not come along. People are being told Russia's bad, and then all of a sudden Hillary's doing business with Russia. This is like the revelation when we were told ISIS is bad, ISIS is evil, then we find out Hillary is sending weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria.
It's sad, Mike, because, we're always, internally, they're always trying to blame somebody else, either for the economy or this or that. But, I mean, look at what Ukraine. We're behind a coup of a democratically elected government, which was overseen by the OSCE. We were behind a coup, but yet the Russians invaded Ukraine. If the Russians invaded Ukraine, it would have been over in 2 hours. 2 to 5 hours, Mike, that would have been it. Because obviously it's right next to their border. People don't realize Kiev used to be the capital of, Russia during, the Soviet Union days.
Yes.
So, people need to realize, what's going on here. It's all phony stuff.
Of course it's all phony stuff. Of course it's all phony stuff. It always has been. But like I said, now it's going to come back to bite Hillary and her people. Now that it's come on out.
Hold me over.
Yeah, I'm going to hold you over. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. We're talking about all the Russia bashing that we have seen over the last several months to turn Russia into our new enemy. And now it's going to backflash on Hillary and everybody involved in the Uranium One deal, because the American people who don't realize the Russia bashing is just propaganda are disposed to say, oh, well, if she's doing business with the Russians, that must really be a bad thing. And it is a bad thing. It's illegal. And she's trying to distance herself from it. Hillary's already saying she wasn't involved in the process, even though she was the chair of that committee and everything. She didn't show up at the meeting, and she had nothing to do with it. And the Russians gave her that $145 million just because she's a wonderful humanitarian. That alone right there says, oh, come on. You know, the bovine excrement is definitely flying out of the ventilation system at this point, and it warrants a full and complete investigation. Now, at this point, we understand there's a reality out there. That because there are so many corrupt politicians around the world, that bribery is in fact a very common tool of statecraft. But if the corporate media takes this story on and all, the first thing they're going to do is try and say, well, it was Russia's fault. Russia tempted Hillary. Hillary was just minding her own business, and all of a sudden, those evil Russians just waved money in front of her, and we're all weak and vulnerable. If you wave enough money in front of anybody's face, they'll go along with it, which is nonsense, okay? There's a lot of people offering bribes out there. I've even been offered bribes to try and put things on my website I don't think should go there. They're not very big, but it does happen. The person who takes that bribe and sells out their office of trust, that's the criminal. That's the law. And that's exactly what should happen with Hillary and all those who enabled her, including, right now, the heads of all the corporate media who are refusing to inform America about this story. Anyway, Dustin, take it away.
Hey, Mike, you know, like, you see these people, like, who would do armed robberies or rip somebody off for a pair of sneakers. Bribes are, like, simple. You know, like, you know, there's so, everybody in Washington's been bribed or blackmailed. You know, like, this whole system is crap. You come down to it. Like, this is all about geopolitics, would you agree? At this point, it's all geopolitics. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea is the enemy because of the petrodollar and the way the system is going. That's what it's coming down to now, right?
Yeah, that's what it's coming down to. I mean, again, the reason that the United States government is targeting China and Russia is they're trying to drag the world back to the Bretton Woods hegemonic domination of the world economy by the U.S. dollar, because that's all that's left to support the U.S. economy.
Hey, did you see on the new issue of The Economist? It's China. China is it.
Yes.
China is the next empire. I know people can't accept that.
I can't.
China, the Eurasia.
China's a manufacturing powerhouse. They make products. They make good products. Yes, they make a lot of junk. You know, I hear a lot of consumers in America.
Mike,
let me finish my thought.
It's up. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. You know, I hear a lot of people complaining about Chinese-made products in these big box stores that don't last very long and they wear on out. Well, that's what the big box stores ordered. If China is asked to produce a high-quality product, they have the means to do so. They make the iPhone. We can't make the iPhone in the United States of America. And if you're not manufacturing products or growing agricultural produce, you cannot be an economic superpower. The U.S. Economic system actually got it into their heads. They were going to be the bankers to the world, and that plan has failed miserably.
Yeah, Mike, China, 85% manufacturing of the world. They don't make crap. If you want crap, they'll make crap. That's how it works.
Yes.
If you're a company and you want to make the cheapest widgets, they'll make the cheap. If you want the most expensive widgets, they'll make the most expensive widgets. But it's not China makes. Yeah, they make the iPhone. They make computer parts. They make everything. 85%. We have 12 to 14% manufacturing in Europe. Probably the same. China is a manufacturing powerhouse of the world. They are a creditor nation. We are a debtor nation, and so is Europe. They're not even our number one. Like they don't export. Like Europe is number one. That's what people understand. We're number two.
Well, we don't
buy as much stuff as Europe.
Yeah, we used to be number one, but nobody can buy anything anymore because our economy has turned into a wartime economy, and that means all of the money is taken away from ordinary people and spent on bombs and bullets and weapons that don't really work, and we don't have anything left to go into the stores, and we're seeing all these iconic stores are starting to close and go out of business. And they're all clinging on the hope of another holiday shopping season that's going to be good. We haven't had a good holiday shopping season in almost a decade now.
Yeah, Mike, Toys R Us, gone.
Yeah,
Nordstrom's, gone. J.C. Penney, gone. In Canada, too. Online sales for clothes is only for everything is only a small percentage still. So nobody has the money to buy these products. There's homeless homeless camps, tents in Los Angeles, and they're on the streets of the highways in California,
yep.
all over the place. They were over here. I'm in Jackson, New Jersey. They're in Lakewood. They're everywhere, and their economy's getting good. That's a bunch of crap. We probably got a 30% unemployment rate, Mike, at this point. I have to say.
Even more than that. We've got 100 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years, and flooding this country with all these new refugees and illegal immigrants is only making the job situation worse. We are headed in a disastrous direction. We're headed for a gigantic fall. And it's all because, the money junkies can only think about just that next influx of money, that next rush, that next hit of money into the veins with the needle. That's all they can think about, like any other addict. They don't see the wider picture of how much damage they're causing to others and the community and the country with their behavior.
All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Lenny in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I want just to piggyback on what you and Dustin were going on about all the Russia bashing. Is really setting our minds up to fight a war with Russia. There, and I feel like the Zionist bankers have given who own all the central banks, have given the leaders of the countries that they control, which all have central banks, they've given them the go-ahead that it's going to be Russia. If it's going to be a world war, they're going to go ahead because Putin and Russia are the only ones standing in the way of them taking over the whole thing. Now, I saw something very interesting last night on the ABC evening news, the national news, and that was they blamed Russia for financing Black Lives Matter.
we know that's coming from George Soros. I mean, this is why nobody's watching the ABC News anymore. I certainly don't. It really is a lot of nonsense. But like I said, all this Russia bashing that's been going on, trying to lead up to a confrontation between the dollar and the ruble, it's now going to backfire on Hillary and all her people. Because those Americans who don't realize the Russia bashing is just a lot of war propaganda, they're going to be much more shocked and angered about the fact that the real Russia collusion story leads to Hillary Clinton and not Donald Trump. And for Hillary Clinton to get $145 million to basically allow Russia to have control of 20% of our uranium resources, and uranium is used to make nuclear weapons, that's a very shocking story for most Americans. And everybody listening to this broadcast or reading my website, you need to copy off all this information, and you need to send it around to everybody. We have to make this go viral. We had this story months ago. Now it's starting to break into the corporate media world through Fox News. Congress is finally starting to take note. We need to make a big stink about this so that they understand the credibility of the entire U.S. government is now on the line. The credibility of the entire corporate media is now on the line. If they don't handle this issue honestly, decisively, and expediently, then we, the American people, are going to know that neither the U.S. government nor the corporate media should be trusted or even listened to from now on.
Well, and I agree with you, but the thing I think that they're counting on is that the mass is never getting it, because notice how the media, the so-called mainstream media, has flipped on Antifa. Now they're flipping on Black Lives Matter. So if they can't get their world war, they're going to get their race war. That's the intent. The thing is to stir up chaos, stir up the crap storm, and let it come out any way they try and make it come out. If they can get chaos, they get what they want. But I'm telling you, it's on. Even the Saakashvili pushing to become the president of Ukraine, all of that is behind to get the attack on Russia going. Okay, because they can't stand that they have lost. They have lost in Syria, they have lost in Iraq, they have lost with Iran. So now they're just becoming apoplectically insane. They have to get something going somewhere. I just wanted to say that. But when you see the so-called mainstream media saying that Putin and Russia are the ones behind Black Lives Matter, that's designed to get a race war going.
Well, again, the positive side is right now, most Americans aren't paying any more attention to the old corporate media. They're going to the internet to get their news. The ratings numbers for the network news are at all times low. Megyn Kelly's new show is absolutely tanking. People just aren't watching those news programs anymore. They're coming to the internet. The numbers at my server are going up without even counting the extra load that the hackers put on there trying to shut us down. And the same is true for all of the other independent media outlets, whether it's InfoWars, Alex Jones, Republic Broadcasting, all of these across the board. Their audiences are growing because the American people have finally realized the extent to which they were being lied to by the government, by the corporate media, and they're desperate to find the truth, and they're coming to the independent media to find it, and that's what we're here for. Nobody in the independent media is getting rich doing this. You know, most of us are just barely hanging on here, and there is a risk. Some of the people that have been doing independent media over the years have wound up with very suspicious deaths, but it's a risk we're all willing to take to try and get this country back on track in hopefully a bloodless manner.
Real quick, and one other thing. If Jeff Sessions thinks it's okay to let Rosenstein investigate himself, maybe we should just let Harvey Weinstein investigate himself. All right?
You're absolutely right about that.
Have a good day, man.
All right. I don't know. Weinstein might just decide to brag. Yeah, I nailed all those women. You know, I can get away with it because I'm a big Hollywood producer and you're not. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
Exactly. That's the sentiment. Later.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And by the way, yeah, there were people in Hollywood who were just like that. They weren't hiding what they were doing. They were bragging about it. Yes, I nailed 5 actresses on the set today in my trailer. All right. We're going to go to Fran in Washington State. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Fran, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now. You're on
Hello?
the air. What's on your mind?
Okay. Oh, that was a weird thing. Okay. I'm going to tiptoe around this because I am not sure of your sentiment on this allied truth seeker.
Uh-huh.
But David Icke put out a video on YouTube 2 days ago, and I watched it last night, and he is point on and entirely truthful.
Mm-hmm.
It's enlightening to watch. Did you by any chance see it?
No, I didn't, but, I have a lot of regard for David Icke, and I know he knows of what I'm doing. I've tried to get him on my show, and I'm always willing to do his show, but it never lines up. But, yeah, he's a pretty straight shooter.
Yeah, all the people need to do, I've got a frog in my throat, is go to YouTube, punch in David Icke, and look for one that was 1017. And it's excellent. I'm telling you, it's excellent. Everybody needs to see this.
Okay.
It's right where we are, and he's certainly backing you up as to what you've been saying. Maybe it's a little deeper, but it was excellent. Got to tell everybody about that.
Okay, well, you just did, and thank you for the phone call. We're gonna let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. Getting on back to the news here. Just in time to distract the corporate media from the Hillary-Russian collusion story, the acting head of the Department of Homeland Security, Elaine Duke, is out there saying Al-Qaeda and ISIS are planning a big attack, just like 9/11. There's a new one coming. Pay no attention to Hillary and Russia. Be afraid of the terrorists. They're coming to get you. Boy, oh boy, they're actually becoming predictable at this point. Now then, getting on back to the news here. Let's spend a little time, not a lot, a little time, with Harvey Weinstein. And basically, Linda Bloodworth Thomason. Now, she was the creator of the 90s sitcom Designing Women, and she's been close friends with Bill and Hillary Clinton for decades. And she says she not only knew of Weinstein's predations, but she had warned top-level Democrats about him, saying, don't get too close. So apparently in a Hollywood Reporter guest column, Linda Bloodworth Thomason drops this bombshell, basically saying, I confess to having had no problems warning at least 3 top-level Democratic operatives against allowing Harvey Weinstein to host political fundraisers, a warning that evidently fell on deaf ears. She says she was also a member of a Let's Bring Harvey Weinstein Down lunch club. Well, I guess that didn't work. And appears to express some disbelief toward those who, despite knowing him for decades, now announce they had no idea what was going on. And again, you had all these women who were traumatized, who were out there saying, this is what this guy did to me. And you had Harvey himself, who apparently wasn't all that concerned about word of his reputation getting out, as long as it didn't get out outside the bounds of Hollywood itself. So let's turn over to the war zone. And here's where we enter the twilight zone. The U.S. is now saying that Assad is to blame for hindering the U.S. anti-ISIS efforts. And when we come back from these commercials, we'll explain why. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting on back to Syria, this is the latest U.S. spin, which I would categorize as desperate and pathetic, to try and make it look like they're on the moral high ground in Syria. And apparently the latest thing is the United States is now saying it's all Bashar al-Assad's fault for hindering U.S. efforts against ISIS by not allowing the U.S.-backed terrorists to take over Raqqa. That's the idea, that Syria wanting to keep Raqqa in Syrian control is the main reason that the United States cannot get rid of ISIS. Well, first of all, we know that the U.S. can stop ISIS anytime they want. They just got to stop signing those checks. I mean, this is a desperate and pathetic piece of propaganda. Nobody's going to buy this one here. Meanwhile, Assad has come on back and saying that basically the defeating of these terrorists in Syria have wrecked the United States schemes. And he's absolutely right, because the U.S., while denouncing ISIS and Al-Qaeda as these horrible enemies, and now they're going to stage a new 9/11 and blame it on them, the reality is the U.S. has been using them as proxies. And we know this because some of the documentation that has come on out through the efforts of Judicial Watch show that while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, the U.S. government smuggled weapons from Libya to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria to use against Bashar al-Assad, using that consulate in Benghazi as the hub. That's an established fact. ISIS and Al-Qaeda work for the United States government. Now, apparently, the IDF decided they were going to attack a Syrian army post on the outskirts of, claiming it was retaliation for an errant rocket that landed in Israel. And again, this rocket hit empty dirt, no damage, no one was hurt. This is just Israel trying to kick off dust. Basically, Israel's trying to do some kind of an attack, knowing that US would welcome an opportunity to go back into Syria on behalf of our good friend in the Middle East, Israel. God is not biting on that one. Now, over in Iran, their Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has sharply denounced President President Trump's hostile policies and insults against the Iranian nation and vows the country will speed up its conventional missile program and regional role in response to enemy threats. Frankly, it comes down to this. If you were leader of a nation and a powerful foreign leader publicly threatened your country at the United Nations, wouldn't you be building missiles? Of course you would. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So getting on back to the news here, the former president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, in an interview with Russia Today, said that ISIS is showing up in Afghanistan as a U.S. tool to cause trouble in the whole region, and he's absolutely correct. Afghanistan has crawled to a standstill. The U.S. can't make any headway there. The American people are sick and tired of war. They're wondering why we're even in Afghanistan, and it's not like the U.S. government can stand up and admit we're there for an oil pipeline and all the opium we can carry. So over the last few weeks, a lot of the ISIS that are disappearing from Syria are all of a sudden showing up in Afghanistan. Oh, ISIS is in Afghanistan. We have to double down. We have to send more soldiers into Afghanistan. And Hamid Karzai is correct. This is just another duplicitous U.S. government stunt to get us into more war. We're going to take a phone call. Don in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yes, I'd like to see Hillary Clinton go to jail. However, this is like, I feel like, once again, on Charlie Brown, and Linus is holding the ball there for the place kick, and Charlie's I'm going to run up there, and she's going to pull the ball away one more time, because it doesn't matter how much stuff. They've already had stuff on her a long time ago. They had stuff on her on the emails, using a private server, running out of her bathroom and all that. They have a million different things on her, but I believe it when I see it, when they finally actually go after her.
Well, I'm getting a sense that a lot of Washington, D.C. want Hillary to retire, but she keeps coming on back, and now she's making noises about being back in politics. She's certainly making the rounds, keeping herself in the news. She's become a serious live liability for the Democratic Party as a whole and for the entire government system, because she's an embarrassment. Because we, the American people, know all these crimes went down, and the government failed to do its official duty to deal with it. So I think this Russian bribery scandal is an effort to get Hillary damaged politically, to make her go away in a way that does not risk exposing the real dark heart of our government, which is that narcocracy. But at this point, in the real world, Charlie Brown would have gunned down Lucy long ago for that kind of a stunt. But there's going to be a breaking point. And I know that Hillary and her people are out there trying as hard as they can to deflect this, distract, more false flags, anything they can do. But they keep playing the same games over and over again, and Americans are waking up to this. And it's one thing to play these kind of propaganda, deception, distraction games on a public that isn't aware the government is capable of such things, and quite another to do it when it's already been done 10 times already and everybody recognizes the pattern again. But I think there's a lot of people who want the Clintons to go away, and hopefully she'll go away quietly. She'll resign. She'll move someplace with Bill that's in a country without extradition. Actually, I expect them to both move to different parts of the world because there's no love lost between those two. But it is time for the Clintons to fade into history along with the Bushes. And as I said before earlier in the show, we're at a point right now where the credibility and legitimacy of the U.S. government as a whole is on the line in terms of how they deal with this scandal. And the same is true for the corporate media, with the exception of Fox News, which has actually run this story. The longer the corporate media tries to pretend this does not exist, the fewer and fewer audience members they'll have, and their ad rates will drop again. They're already lying about their audience. They're already using botnets to fake clicks to their website to cheat their advertisers. That's how desperate they are right now.
I agree with you that the Clintons have to be gotten rid of. They have to. A long time ago, they should have gotten rid of. But you mentioned the Bushes. Today was also a time when Mr. George W. Bush launched his barely veiled rebuke of Trump. Did you see the speech he made? He called Trump a racist.
Yes.
I mean, so they're not giving up. That's their last gasp when they have to run out the substitute, the third string quarterback George W. Bush, and put him out there and have him try to say something. Like that's going to really help him out. But yeah,
well, the Bushes are scared out of their mind right now, because if Hillary cracks and she starts to go public about all this other stuff that's been going on in an effort to save her, they're going to open up that narcocracy, and the Bushes are neck deep in it, right along with the Clintons, right along with the Central Intelligence Agency. And that is something I can't imagine the American people would ever sit still for, is to understand that the government itself has been the prime dealer of these illegal drugs into the streets of America, into the hands of our young people.
I hope you're right, Mike, that something good comes out of here and actually get some action out of the Jeffrey Sessions Department of Justice over there. But I guess I'm more cynical than you are. I don't really anticipate any good happening, but I hope you're right. I'll let you go.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. Well, here's what it comes down to. If the government does nothing about this scandal, it's going to destroy their credibility and legitimacy in the eyes of the American people. Same thing with the corporate media. So regardless of what they do or do not do, this is a win for the American people. It's a wake-up call as to just how totally corrupted the entire system has become. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Getting on back to the war zones, at this point it is looking like the attempt to create a new independent Kurdistan is failing. And while I certainly was on the side of the Kurdistans having their own country, we need to remember that there was a larger agenda at work, which was the partitioning of Iraq and Syria as part of the Eretz Israel project. And so now that the Iraq Prime Minister Haider Abadi has sent in the army and security forces to take control of the Kurdish areas, that's the end of that plan to balkanize Iraq and Syria. And that's a major setback to the U.S. and to Israel, more to Israel than the U.S. Now, as you know, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have come, after a long time, to a unity deal to form a single, unified government of all the Palestinian areas, Gaza Strip, West Bank, and so forth and so on. And Donald Trump's envoy decided to come on in and say, well, listen, your unity deal has to include a pledge to disarm and to recognize Israel. And the Palestinian movement, Hamas, basically said, this is blatant interference in the internal affairs of our country. And you have no right to come on in there and make those demands. And they're absolutely right. When you look at the number of people Israel is killing in Palestine versus the other way, you realize it's a one-sided conflict. And calling for the disarmament of the Palestinians is only going to make it worse. That's like calling for more gun bans in Baltimore and Chicago. It's only going to up the body count. And there's one more thing the president needs to understand. Every other nation in the Middle East will recognize Israel's right to exist exactly 1 second after Israel recognizes Palestine's right to exist. If Israel would only give to others that which it demands for itself, all this strife and pain and bloodshed could have been avoided. But the problem is here that Israel has this attitude, is you must recognize our right to exist. We don't have to recognize your right to exist. That's the problem. And for the U.S. to go along supporting such an obvious apartheid policy is shameful. And yes, there's been another Palestinian shot by the IDF soldiers. The army claimed the man was armed with a knife and was running towards soldiers when he was shot. Witnesses all around there saying he did not have a knife. He was actually running to catch a bus. And he was shot down. Apparently, there's been a video released of Israeli settlers stealing the olive harvest of West Bank Palestinian farmers. And the police apparently detained briefly and then released all the suspects, and I presume they got to keep the olives. And so basically this non-governmental organization provided documentation that shows settlers in the act throwing rocks, and Palestinian farmers claim that settlers not only stole from the trees, they vandalized hundreds of the trees. And here is the issue. It takes 10 years after you plant an olive tree before you get a saleable, usable crop. And what makes it all the more difficult is these thefts and vandalism occurred mainly on Palestinian land near settlements the Palestinians can only reach by coordinating ahead of time with the Israeli military. In other words, they can't even go on their own farmlands without permission from the Israeli military. The settlers can come and go as they want. And these Israeli settlers are able to behave like this because their religion teaches them that you've got the moral high ground. It's okay for you to do this to non-Jews. It's perfectly okay. They're fair game. Go on out and have fun. Now, Russia is very concerned over the U.S. withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. See, this is treaty busting season, apparently. Going to get rid of the P5+1, going to get rid of the INF. You know, what other treaties are in our way? We're just going to drop them in the shredder. Washington, D.C. is now a treaty-free zone, and again, it is sending a message to the rest of the world. You cannot trust any promises made by the U.S. government. So the latest one is Washington has pulled out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and Russia is saying, well, then obviously they're no longer bound by that agreement, and this is going to lead to a new escalation of intermediate range nuclear missiles on both sides. In the escalating tit-for-tat coming out of Washington, D.C., Moscow is saying that they will respond immediately if Washington moves against the Russian media. Now, over the weekend, of course, Israel shuttered Palestinian media in the West Bank, including the broadcaster for Russia Today. Just went on in, said, you're all guilty of incitement, locked it all down, boarded it up. There's been talk in this country about declaring Russia Today and Sputnik News agents of foreign propaganda and closing them down. And Moscow is saying, if you do that, you know, we'll just shut down CNN and MSNBC and all the rest of that are operating currently in Russia. I think it would be a bad idea. I think the people of the world need to see the world through several viewpoints all around the world in order to figure out how to avoid getting sucked into a new war. But that's where they're going with all this. Meanwhile, in another example of ignoring a treaty, Russia, in response to the international treaties banning chemical weapons, has finished destroying all of its chemical weapons. They finished in September. And now Russia is calling on the United States to say, you know, it really is time for you to destroy your chemical weapons. And speaking at a meeting of the First Committee of the UN General Assembly on Wednesday, Deputy Director of the Russian Foreign Ministry's Department for Non-Proliferation and Arms Control, Vladimir Yermakov, blasted the United States for undermining the international treaties banning chemical weapons for continuing to stockpile them. He said, we call on all of the countries still possessing chemical weapons to follow Russia's lead without delay. That concerns first and foremost the country that initiated the convention, which has always been the most active proponent of its ideas when it came to other countries, and now for some reason continues to be the largest possessor of chemical weapons. He means the United States. The United States started this convention on chemical weapons, ran around the world screaming, oh, they've got chemical weapons, they got to get rid of them, like we saw in Syria, we saw in Iraq. And now that all these other nations have destroyed their chemical weapons, the U.S. is out there saying, oh, my goodness, we still have a huge bunch of these things here. Imagine that. Really, it was just an oversight on our part. We'll get around to destroying them in 10 or 20 years. To the U.S. government, disarmament means we're going to disarm the other people to make it easier and cheaper to invade them. Meanwhile, over in Myanmar, things are getting really ugly. The militarily controlled ethnocracy is causing an exodus of 100,000 Rohingyas every single week. We are a world at war. Nobody wants to call it a world war, but we are a world at war, no question. Now, over on North Korea, the joint exercise between South Korea and the United States is due to end tomorrow, actually later today. They're on the other side of the international date line. And so far, North Korea hasn't done anything. Haven't fired a missile, haven't set off a nuclear test. They're just sitting there quietly while the rhetoric about war and everything continues to ramp up in Washington, D.C. Putin is out there with a word of caution and wisdom, telling the United States government, don't back Kim Jong-un into a corner because you don't know how he's going to behave. And all this idea about calling him Rocket Man and insulting and degrading him. And again, apparently our current State Department does not appreciate the idea of face in the Asian countries and how important that is. So Putin is basically saying, if you push Kim Jong-un, he will do something irrational. Of course, that may very well be what the U.S. Warhawks want. They're going to push him until Kim Jong-un fires a missile, or they'll fire one of their own missiles and blame it on Kim Jong-un, and the war will be on. Our government is desperate to get a major war going before the economy comes apart, so that they've got a villain to blame it all on. Oh, it's not our fault the economy fell apart. It's those evil Iranian, Russian, Chinese, North Korean, Syrian, Somalia, everybody else on the planet. It's all their fault. Meanwhile, Paul Craig Roberts, who was the Assistant Treasury Secretary under the Reagan administration, is out there signaling a warning. The record highs you are seeing in the stock markets are based on phony profits that come from global central banks propping up the financial system. The plunge protection team, the riggers. We've been saying that for months. The stock market is totally out of sync with the real economy. They're just pouring money in to make it look like it's really good. And Paul Craig Roberts is saying the biggest danger to stocks right now is the dollar itself because of how uncertain it is right now. Bank of America has come on out with their list of 10 triggers for the next crash. They're now predicting it's going to happen somewhere between Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day. It's going to happen real soon. Everybody's in agreement on that. They don't know exactly when or how, but they know it's going to start coming apart. And that's why the U.S. government is desperate to get a major war going, because they're absolutely convinced that if there's a major war going, you, the American people, will forget about how the government ruined the economy, how Wall Street plundered the population, all the crimes, the corruption, the neglect of the infrastructure. You'll forget all about all of that. You'll throw the flag a snappy salute and fling what's left of your money and your children onto the designated enemy's bayonets because, hey, that's what worked the last two times. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are on the brink. But it's a very different world today. The American people are far more skeptical about the reasons to go to war. And they're not going to buy off this idea that the economic crash is caused by all these outside nations when we have seen the decline of the U.S. economy under the guidance of the Washington, D.C. and Wall Street for over the last 30 years. This didn't happen overnight. We're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And it looks like the corporate media is feeling that they have to react to the Hillary, Russia, Uranium One story. And so the Washington Compost has already come on out with a story in which they're claiming that all this stuff about Hillary and the Uranium One deal, it's just a manufactured distraction to take the focus off of Trump's collusion with Russia, and we need to go back to just focusing on that. We're going to talk about that all the time. Don't have any evidence for it, but that's what we're going to be focusing on. And for this other Hillary Uranium One stuff, yeah, there's some evidence and documentation for it, but really it's really just a distraction here. We all know we've got to go after Donald Trump. We also know that the Washington Compost is hand in glove with the Central Intelligence Agency. We know that the Central Intelligence Agency, in turn, is hand in glove with the narcocracy, because they have been running drugs into this country going at least as far back as Vietnam, possibly before that, in order to use the proceeds from the drug trades to fund CIA operations that are not approved of and funded by Congress. That's what was going on in Arkansas in the 1980s, where the CIA was smuggling weapons down to the Nicaraguan Contras, and to pay for it all, they were bringing cocaine back into the country, back into Arkansas, where it was sold and the money was laundered through a network of land flip deals like Whitewater, banks like Madison Guarantee, and finally the funds were paid out to the suppliers of the mission through the Arkansas Development Finance Authority under then Governor Bill Clinton. And the Arkansas Development Finance Authority was created by Arkansas Act 1082, written by Webb Hubbell, and signed into law by Bill Clinton, and basically every check that went on out of the Arkansas Development Finance Authority was signed by Bill Clinton. It was a state program, and that was the money machine. That's what paid for all the untraceable guns to be manufactured, for all those smuggling flights down into Nicaragua, and provided cover for the returning flights and the cocaine by keeping away all the state drug investigators from certain airports. That's how it all worked out. So the CIA is definitely going to be on the side of the Clintons on this one, because they don't want that coming out. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Jerome in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Man, what's on my mind is this mess that's going on with this uranium. It's in my opinion, and I'm sure many people's opinions, is quite ridiculous. And I'm wondering why this heifer hadn't been hung up and strung up and parted out in 5 different ways on a horsehair and, with a rope and, all that stuff. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. None of it makes sense. I say string these motherfuckers up and let the people fucking fight them.
Okay, first of all, tone down the language here, because we don't want our on-air affiliates.
My apologies.
Yeah,
my apologies.
I know. Even though our country is dumping white-hot, flaming death on innocents around the world, including children, we're not allowed to use bad words on the radio to prove that we are a just and moral people.
Yeah.
So there we are on that.
You have. If you sneak bubble gum into your classroom, you got to share it with everyone. You can't have any.
Well, yeah, various other things like that. I mean, there are so many things the Clintons and the Bushes have gotten away with, including that drug running in Arkansas, and they should have been held to account. And we're here 30 years on, and realizing that, yes, for them to have gotten away with what they got away with, the entire government is corrupt. And we're finding that out now about how James Comey was going to exonerate her even before he investigated her. It is a completely corrupt system, and it needs to go.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I do not disagree with you. I know for a fact that, and the reason I know this is because I went to high school with the godchild of Bill Clinton's best friend. And it's all about the Freemasonry. It is all about the Freemasonry.
Well, no, I think it's all about the drug money and the power is really what it's all about. Jerome, we're going to have to let you go. We're going to do a commercial break. We're going to be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Jeremiah in Wyoming. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Hey, I need to get your opinion on something you were talking about yesterday.
Yes.
With Russia and China pulling away from the U.S. dollar.
Yes.
Do you think this is some kind of ploy to basically trick the United States into attacking them so they can take us down?
No, I don't think so. I don't think either Russia or China want a war. What they want to do is to simply, conduct business with the rest of the world without having to go through the U.S. dollar, which is quite costly over the long run for them to do. It is the U.S. that is trying to drag the world back to the Bretton Woods Agreement through force of arms, because over the decades, our economic system got dependent on Bretton Woods, and it got lazy. There was just all this automatic wealth was coming into the nation. Either they were borrowing these Federal Reserve dollars at interest, or they were bringing in manufactured goods and agricultural produce in order to have these dollars to trade with other countries, in particularly buying oil, the petrodollar deal, which came into being after Nixon ended gold convertibility. So it really is the U.S. trying to get these wars going, maybe not even hot wars, but just cold wars, to try and isolate Russia and China and bring the rest of the world back to using the U.S. dollar. But I don't think that's really going to work, because everybody is now realizing the U.S. government cannot be trusted, and that's probably extending to the currency as well.
Do you think this will take even if it's not just a ploy, do you think this will bring the United States down?
I think the United States is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse. That's our best option. If we actually get into a war with Russia and China, I don't think this country can win. I think we're going to lose. Everybody has to lose these things. And looking at the high cost and poor performance of America's weapons versus the much better bang for buck that you're seeing out of the current Chinese and Russian weapons. Plus, the American soldiers aren't motivated. They understand these are all wars of conquest, that these are all war crimes they're committing. Go back and read your Sun Tzu, The Art of War. For a ruler to prevail in war, he must have a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die in it. And they must have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so they will bear the burden that war brings to the civilians, even on the winning side. Our government has neither one of those.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it, Mike. I just wanted your opinion on that.
Well, thanks an awful lot there. We're going to let you go and switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I noticed you're eating grapes. I hope they're Concords. Are they?
I don't really know. They're from the local health food market thing, and they're seedless, and they're very good.
They look really dark.
Yeah, they are. They're very, very dark, very red. Lots of resveratrol in them.
Yeah, exactly. In your opinion, and I hold it in very high regard, do you think that the United States has been cannibalized to the point where, like you say, there's only one way to go, and that is a collapse? Because, I kind of see it that way as well. The Federal Reserve is carrying almost $5 trillion on its balance sheet. That's a quarter of the United States GDP. Right?
Yes.
And obviously, that stuff is not performing well. Otherwise, they would start letting it go, and they can't because of interest rates and all the other nonsense.
Well, they could let it go. It's all make-believe debt. That money that we're being told we owe to the Federal Reserve, it never existed. It's just accumulated interest in a book-keeping entry, and it could be written off at any time. And there have been cases where banks have, in order to re-stimulate an economy, just said, we're just going to wipe out the debt. Okay? Get a bottle of white out, boom, it's gone. And they start over. It's the greed of the bankers who will not let it go because they think that debt represents something real. Basically, it represents your indentured servitude toward those bankers.
And also, the rest of the world, especially the Western world, would suffer. Not as long as the United States would, but they would suffer nonetheless. And it's systemic. This is huge. It is, because the rest of the Western world, in Japan as well, and China, they're basically propping up the world economy to the tune of 20%. And it hasn't. How long does it take to unwind 20% of the world GDP, Mike? It can't happen.
No, it can't. And apparently the conventional wisdom is they can keep the system going forward by simply creating new money out of thin air. The problem with that is eventually you're going to drive the value of that money down to absolute zero. That's what happened down in Zimbabwe, where everybody was walking around with these paper notes that said $100 trillion in their pockets, and their real value was something like 27 cents. You can still buy those as curiosities over on eBay. But again, they're trying to inflate the debt away, but all they can do is inflate the value of the dollar away, and that's why the countries don't want to deal with it. We're seeing situations here where American companies doing business with foreign companies, and they want to get a price estimate on something, and the price estimate will come on in and say, this estimate is only good for the next 30 days. They are that uncertain about the value of the dollar in the future.
Not to mention, it's the petrodollar, and oil is very low right now. I mean, it has been for a while. It's less than half of what it traded for just a few years ago. So does that mean we have suffered,
an
inflation
not
of
directly.
100%?
Not directly. Not directly. The petrodollar deal was simply an arrangement in which oil was traded only for the U.S. dollar, and it came into existence after.
Just breaking.
Yeah, well, basically it was a deal that the U.S. made with all these Middle Eastern oil countries. After Nixon ended gold convertibility, that was the Nixon shock. That's when the rest of the world began to understand that the U.S. didn't really have the gold to back all those Federal Reserve notes that were in circulation, and more importantly, might not have had all the gold that they claimed to have to collateralize U.S. government borrowing. That's why this issue about actually going into Fort Knox and counting the gold has become so important for so many of these other countries. And it was at that point Nixon did two things. The first thing he did was the petrodollar deal, where they went to all these Middle Eastern oil countries and they said, we'll make you this deal. If you sell your oil only for the U.S. dollar and then invest those dollars in the United States economy, we will guarantee your military security. And that was called the petrodollar deal. So anybody who wanted to buy Middle Eastern oil had to first come to the United States of America and either borrow at interest or trade manufactured goods and agricultural produce for U.S. dollars to then go to Saudi Arabia and buy the oil. That was the petrodollar deal. The second thing Richard Nixon did was create the Environmental Protection Agency, which had absolutely nothing to do with protecting the environment and everything to do with starting to grab and sequester public lands to pledge as collateral on the U.S. government debt. And they had all these different programs, heritage rivers, wilderness zones, roadless areas, and they had all these programs to conceal the true scale of the federal government's land grab, all of it in violation of the Constitution's enclave clause. And at this point, collectively, the EPA and its twin sister of evil, the Bureau of Land Management, have grabbed almost 20% of America's heritage lands and locked them away as collateral on U.S. government borrowing.
That's a very interesting number, Mike, 20%.
Yes.
20% of the GDP of the United States is right now the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve.
It is out of control. It's headed for collapse. Don't know where it's going to happen. I mean, Bank of America says between Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day. So be prepared. You know.
The United States has been cannibalized.
Yes.
And it's going to take down the rest of us.
I have one Bitcoin. Okay.
You have one?
I have one Bitcoin. There it is.
How long did it take you to mine?
Actually, I bought it off of eBay. It's a real coin, Bitcoin.
Oh.
I don't know. It's not really worth anything. It's just a curiosity.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Because you live in Hawaii, right?
Yes, I do.
So, you could get like a solar panel and run a little laptop off the side for free, right?
Yeah.
Not for free. You got to pay for all that stuff. But, in the end, you could mine a couple of Bitcoins a year.
Well, it's entirely possible. We certainly have the room to do it. I have friends who got involved with it, but in the end, they were burning up more computer equipment than the bitcoins were worth at the time they were being mined. I really do have, I think, more important things to devote my time to right now, like stopping this war. Because I'd be really annoyed if I went through all the trouble of setting up a solar panel and laptop to mine bitcoins, and then North Korea nukes us, or the U.S. nukes us on behalf of North Korea. That would really I would really be angry about it. It's another reason I'm holding off buying a newer car. I would be really angry if I spent all that money on a newer car and then it gets blown up by a nuclear bomb. That would really, really annoy me.
Mike, you are awesome. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you very much here. We're going to let you go, and thank you for the phone call. The phone lines are now open. Now, getting into the world's economic news, it looks like all these sanctions against Iran are really going to hurt only the United States. And apparently a Norwegian firm, Saga Energy, has just signed an almost $3 billion solar energy deal with Iran to build solar power plants in Iran. And so Iran is having no problems doing business with the rest of the world. They just aren't doing business with American companies. And see, these American companies are standing up and saying the U.S. sanctions are getting in the way of our doing business. And on Iran's side, they're saying we're perfectly open to doing business with the American companies. It's your government that refuses to let us play together. Now, Iran, hopefully they can get the solar energy to work. There's been issues of efficiency and maintenance and so forth. But Iran understands something that is very, very important. The oil under their land is not infinite. It will run out someday. And they're already making the moves to alternative forms of power. Nuclear power, solar power. It's a very wise and prudent thing to be doing. As opposed to here in the United States where everybody is still locked into that petroleum economy. And there's token efforts at green energy, none of which really work on out. We're going to take a phone call here. Brittany in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I had a question with this stock market crash. Aren't there safeguards in place with the stock exchange so it's not supposed to fall, 7% and then 20%?
Yeah, there are all kinds of what are called stop points where if the stock market is going down, they put in the stop trades, and basically it gives everybody time to cool down and think carefully about what they're doing. But unless my little app on my cell phone is defective, it looks like the stock market, it was definitely down earlier in the day, but not all by that much. And Dow Jones ended in the green slightly. Standard & Poor's ended in the green slightly. NASDAQ down almost 20. But yeah, earlier in the day, it did look like it was a lot worse. Now, again, if something is going on in the market that is not being reflected on this, but yeah, there are supposed to be stop trade mechanisms in place to prevent an all-out crash to the bottom. The problem is that if it's a really major correction, they can't just keep those stop trades in place forever. They're on timers, and they would be, the markets would open for trading again, and the hope that everybody was going to calm down might evaporate, and it would just go from one stop trade to the next stop trade to the next stop trade to the next stop trade.
Gotcha. Yeah, I heard during 9/11 they actually had closed the market for like 4 days.
I don't think it was for 4 days. I know that they did hit a stop trade in the afternoon because the markets were in turmoil, but I don't think it was shut for 4 days. I don't recall hearing about that.
Okay. Just wondering, so if this economy does crash and everything goes down the drain, what's going to prevent these stocks from just going to zero?
Well, there's nothing to stop them. All the stop trade blocks are going to do is delay the process and just drag it on out. But again, the real issue is if there is a collapse and your local power goes down or your internet goes down, you can't get to the money in your bank even if it's still there. And again, our advice to everybody is you should only have as much money in the bank as you need to cover your immediate obligations. You should have the rest at home under your own control. And I keep going on back to that event we had at Safeway Market a couple of weeks ago, where whatever computer system was behind those little keypads on all the checkout lanes went down. The internet connection, don't really know. I didn't ask. I wasn't all that concerned. But everybody who was there with a plastic card, any kind of card, credit card, debit card, EBT card, didn't matter. They could not check out their groceries. They had money, but they still were not allowed to leave the store with their purchases. Claire and I, we do everything we can in cash. We paid our cash. We took our groceries. We went home. And there's a lesson in that. Don't make yourself be made dependent on those electronic systems because they're unreliable, they are hackable. You're wide open to being plundered and pillaged if you have all of your wealth inside a computer somewhere.
Yeah, I hear you. I haven't paid with a debit card in years. Cash and carry.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, just wonder because, I mean, even if you don't have money in the bank, you know, only to cover your obligations, I mean, if people have money in the stock market, you know, that's where a lot of that is. And if that goes down, then everybody's going to be wiped out. Well, you know, and what are you going to have to borrow with?
Well, the problem is the stock market, as Paul Craig Roberts is saying, it's being propped up with instant money, phony profits, mark-to-market accounting, whatever. They're pushing it up there to use as a political banner. And people who are not paying attention to the plunge protection team, they're thinking, yeah, I don't need to buy gold or silver or platinum or copper. I'm going to put my money in the stock market. And they are just being set up for a massive, massive slaughter. And I've never actually owned a stock myself, but I can see the warning signs. Anyway, Brittany, got to let you go. Got to do some commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in Catalan, things are very, very tense here. The Kurdistan independence, that seems to be over and done with already. But Catalan is still a very, very tense situation. And Catalan is saying that they have not yet issued a formal declaration of independence. They're willing to engage in diplomacy with Madrid about some compromise of greater autonomy. Madrid, on the other hand, is taking the position, we're just going to march the tanks on in and take you over, throw you all in jail. And the Catalan leader is saying, well, if Spain triggers this so-called nuclear option, they will declare independence immediately, and we're looking at a real bloody Spanish civil war. So, again, a world at war. Where do you go to get away from all this stuff? Now, Vladimir Putin has come out with a very cogent observation. He's wagging his finger at all these countries that are saying Kurdistan shouldn't be independent, Catalan shouldn't be independent, Crimea shouldn't be independent, Donetsk shouldn't be independent, and all these regions in Europe that are talking about independence now. And Putin is reminding everybody that the European Union started this whole idea of separatism when they supported Kosovo independence. Remember when Kosovo broke free and there was a little bit of a war there, and the EU and the U.S. went on in on the side of Kosovo and dropped a lot of bombs and everything, because Kosovo had some very important mining resources that the European Union and the U.S. wanted access to. So Putin is right. The U.S. and EU went in and meddled in Kosovo, and that's given these other countries ideas about, well, yeah, we can break free. It's even in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights over at the UN. So the more the U.S. tinkers with other countries, the more damage it causes. And nobody ever thinks about the blowback. There's always the immediate agenda. We're going to accomplish this. Oh, what happens after that? Who cares? Somebody else's job. Now, Angela Merkel, as you know, her CDU party had its worst parliamentary election results since 1949. She held on to power just barely, although there are already people in the streets saying Merkel must go, Merkel must go. And it's been complicated by the fact that the Christian Democratic Unity Party, CDU regional president of Saxony, basically has resigned because of the especially disastrous election results. Despite all of this, Chancellor Merkel insists her tactics work, and there's no reason for her to change anything that she has been doing, even though this is going to put her in direct conflict with the other parties who did very well in the parliamentary elections, from which she has to put together some kind of a coalition government. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with hour number 3 of our show after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and getting on back to the news here. Something very weird is out there. I posted this to whatreallyhappened.com. As you know, a lot of people lost their homes to Hurricane Harvey, and there is a lot of aid that's out there to get rebuilding funds here. And basically, there we are. There was this agreement to help people get money. The Hurricane Harvey Repair Grant Application and Agreement by and between the City of Dickinson and insert your name here. And it goes on down saying that the funds are available and you can get the funds, blah, blah, blah. And there's a whole bunch of articles about the termination. The interesting one, though, is Article 11. Okay, Article 11 of this paperwork to get money to replace your home that was lost in the hurricane reads as follows. Verification not to boycott Israel. By executing this agreement below, the applicant verifies that the applicant does not boycott Israel and will not boycott Israel during the term of this agreement. Now, what the heck does hurricane relief have to do with Israel? It's just another reminder of how our entire nation is being ruled by a puppet government. I mean, I saw that and it was just shocking. It's ridiculous. Now, over in Cambridge University, they're having English literature undergraduates are focused on the works of Shakespeare, as well they should be. And they were looking at a lecture focusing on Titus Andronicus and the Comedy of Errors. And the school felt necessary to issue a list of trigger warnings, things that might be discussed in these plays that might upset you. Yeah. Titus Andronicus, certainly. But I mean, if you're studying Shakespeare, you have a pretty good idea what's in there. And all of a sudden you have the politically correct social justice warriors out there. We have to warn you of Shakespeare. He says bad things. He says things that will shock you and anger you. I'm getting the feeling that the goal of political correctness is to turn us all into a bunch of sissies that are just offended and troubled by everything. Oh my goodness, it's a butterfly. Hide, 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 hide. It's utterly ridiculous here. Now, let's get back on to that story about Jesus Campos. And a lot of people are looking at his appearance on the Ellen DeGeneres show. And it's raised quite a few questions. Now, as you know, there are questions about Jesus himself. Is he a U.S. citizen? Why wasn't he registered with the state of Nevada as a security guard? And he was lined up for all kinds of interviews on real news programs like Fox News, and all of a sudden he quits. He isn't seen for days. There are rumors of a gag order, and then all of a sudden he shows up on the Ellen DeGeneres show. And everybody's saying, why that show and what's going on? So there were some weird things that were going on. And everybody's asking, why did Campos choose to go on the Ellen DeGeneres show after canceling his appearance on Fox News and other real news channels? Let's face it, Ellen DeGeneres is a talk show. Now, apparently people were pointing out that Jesus Campos walked onto the set with a walking stick, because it was supposedly shot in the leg, but appeared to handle it more like a prop than a real necessity. That's kind of open issue. Ellen never asked him about which leg was shot or his recovery time. And apparently Ellen basically took over the interview and led Campos through the story as if she knew it better than he did. She even got blueprints of the 32nd floor of the hotel and with a pointer guided Campos through the narration. We now know there was another person in the hallway that night, a woman whom Campos said he told to go back into her room. Who is she? What did she see and hear? Why isn't she being interviewed by the media? And finally, a lot of people are wondering why it is Ellen DeGeneres appeared to speak for Jesus Campos and told the world that he would not be granting another interview ever. It's all very questionable and suspicious, and it ought to be here. Now, apparently, George Soros' daughter has given $500,000 to Planned Parenthood Votes. This is the political action arm of Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider. And apparently, Andrea Soros Columbell made the donation on August 1st. This donation accounts for more than a quarter of the money that the group has raised so far this year. So Soros is now getting involved with Planned Parenthood as part of his globalist agenda. Now, as you know, first of all, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We have been talking about just how ridiculous the PC movement has become, how out of touch with reality this whole gender fluidity ought to be, and how ridiculous women's studies have become. And it's not a recent thing. There was a book that was put out called Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hobbs Sommers, who was a feminist herself, but was chronicling the change where the women's movement went from equity feminism, which was all about fairness, equal pay for equal work, equal access to school, equal access to credit. Those are things we could all get behind. And I was a supporter of the feminist movement when they were doing that. And then all of a sudden it got hijacked by political opportunists who turned it into this constant male bash, scream rape, women should be afraid and hide in their closets from all the evil men, what was called gender feminism, which was typified by people like Andrea Dworkin, who advocated randomly killing men to keep us in our place. And that kind of extreme behavior. And it discredited the whole feminist movement, as did the rape hysteria, which actually caused a lot more damage in the long run because police departments became so afraid of lawsuits by wrongfully accused men that they started ignoring real rape victims. And so in the end, the feminists actually caused a rape epidemic by hobbling the police with all the fake cries about rape. So now we have Camille Paglia, who is a feminist herself and was a champion for a lot of these things, and now she's pulling back and saying that really women's and gender studies departments should be defunded. And she says what's wrong with them is that if you look at other departments in a university, like the English department, they've developed over a century, they have a curriculum, they have a long tradition of education. And then all of a sudden, universities were creating departments with a politicized agenda from the start, taught by people without any training in that field. And Paglia argued that these active programs were thrown together out of the urgency to highlight women's issues in the curriculum of the American Academy, and it caused more harm than good. And the same thing is happening now with the so-called gender studies. It's all politically driven. It's all liberal ideology. And as we pointed out yesterday, we've got pediatricians that are out there saying these parents that are forcing their children to live as the opposite gender or forcing their children to get drugs that block puberty under the theory that their gender should be fluid, they're committing chemical castration on the kids. It really is child abuse. Kids already grow up way too fast. Kids should be allowed to remain kids for as long as possible, because growing up, growing old is a one-way street. You take that away from them, there's no going back. Kids at that age shouldn't even be talking about sex. They don't have any idea. The glands haven't kicked in yet. They're not even thinking about sex at that age. Now, over in Massachusetts, Boyden Elementary School has decided to drop their annual Halloween costume parade. And it's all political correctness, and it's something that the school children look forward to. It's the funnest day of the year next to Christmas. But the school's principal issued a letter to parents that read in part, "The costume parade is out of our ordinary routine and can be difficult for many students. The parade is not inclusive of all the students, and it's our goal each and every day to ensure all students' individual differences are respected." So they're going to call Halloween Black and Orange Spirit Day, which is going to be offensive to all of us white, green, and blue people. It really is ridiculous. I mean, at the same time, we are being told that we should have respect for the holidays and traditions of the refugees. I mean, Merkel just got into trouble declaring a Muslim holiday to be part of the German national holidays. We're told respect their culture, but don't respect yours. We're going to erase yours. We're going to make yours go away. I don't think so. I'm a big fan of Halloween. I mean, when I was a kid, my brothers and I, we would turn our house into a haunted house. And easy for me, I worked in special effects. I had all the equipment, fog machines, all of that stuff. Kids are coming from, blocks around to come trick-or-treat at our house. One year I'd done a bunch of Halloween props for Magic Mountain, which included like floating talking skull, and so I had all of that hardware left over. We did it up right. We had fun. Don't take that away from the kids. Every culture has a Day of the Dead. And behind all the festivity and the candy and the fun, it's helping young people start to adjust to the idea of their own mortality. And that's something that they're all going to have to deal with at some point in their life. Don't want to force it on them, but they'll figure it out. They'll start asking the right questions here. Now, a lot of people are very concerned over this effort at censorship we're seeing out of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. It really is getting kind of nasty out there. But, what is happening is there are some new up-and-coming ventures in social media that are respecting the rights of the First Amendment. And if you're sick and tired of YouTube interfering with your videos, rigging the search results, there's an alternative called DTube. And it's powered through Steemit, which is the decentralized alternative to Facebook. So all these social media companies are doing with all this censorship is they're basically cutting their own throats and opening the doors to the competition to come in and get them. And it is happening. I haven't been to Facebook in months now. And I probably need to get around to closing out my account and making sure that all that data is erased. Not that there's anything embarrassing on Facebook, because I know better than to put anything personal in social media. There's no privacy on the internet. There never was. But I don't use it anymore. I don't even remember the last time I used my Twitter account. I'm using the new alternatives. And so should you be. Apparently there's another story. This came out of Polls News Infinity and Polls News Alert, were all suspended from Twitter, all on the same day. Their accounts were banned, including the main backup and the admin's personal Twitter account. So this is what I'm talking about, this censorship that's out there. Interestingly enough, we're now seeing a motion by the government that all social media should be redefined as publishers, which would bring them further under government control. So that social media would be handled with the same laws that apply to the Washington Compost or the New York Slimes or the rest of those. So we'll see where that goes. Now, apparently over in Germany, industry experts are warning the German people electric prices are going to rise significantly because Germany went all in to this idea of green renewable energies. They wouldn't cost anything, reduce pollutants, create a clean environment, improve the climate, create many jobs, and it just didn't work on out. The landscape is being industrialized. Germany has not reduced its greenhouse gases in more than 7 years. The climate is still the same. Actually, it's cooler, but that's got nothing to do with the green energy. And now Germany's industrial base is starting to erode because of the high costs of German electricity. These were all boondoggle projects. They were undertaken to satisfy a political need, not a real-world need. Look at the Cylinder case, for example, where you had this huge solar power venture and it went bust. Or some of these wind farms, where it turned out the turbines that were supposed to last 25 years started coming apart after just a few years, and worse, the company that made them and the replacement parts has now gone out of business. So they were done for show. They were political paybacks. These contracts and loan guarantees and funding were given to political supporters of various politicians, and then paraded around as we're doing something about the environment, and now you have to give up your carbon taxes in your car, so forth and so on. I'm looking at some of the stuff the members are posting on our page, and apparently over at the Michelle Obama Public Library, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle where there was this, they called it Drag Queen Story Hour, in which a man dressed as a woman reads to young children, all approved by the Church of Satan. It really is getting weird out there. Okay. Congress is now stepping back on in. They're looking at this Trump dossier. They still cannot get any information from Fusion GPS about how the document came into being. And by the way, Fusion GPS was also the company that was hired by Planned Parenthood to try and put out the message that the undercover videos of them selling baby parts were deceptively edited. So that's where these people are coming from. Now they're starting to look on whether or not the Obama Department of Justice used this dossier before the surveillance court, the Foreign Intelligence Service court. And the reason they're doing that is because they had to have something to get a FISA warrant to look at Trump and his associates. And if they did it on the basis of a fraudulent affidavit, then the warrant is automatically invalid. So they're going back to look at that situation here. Let's see. Oh, Playboy has just announced their first transgender playmate. Well, that's okay. I gave up reading Playboy a long time ago. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And when we come on back, we're going to be talking about more of this political correctness stuff, all of this issue over. We're probably going to recap at some point this story of Hillary and Russia. And to see the Washington Post come on out there and say, oh, it's just out there as a distraction from Trump and Russia, they got to be really desperate. They have got to be really, really Desperate to do that. So pick up the line, call on in. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to our show here. And looking through the news here, North Korea apparently has come on out and opened their yap again. They're not doing anything. They're not doing any missile tests, no nuke tests. But they're out there saying basically if the U.S.-South Korea drills continue, North Korea will hit the U.S. with an unimaginable strike. Or at least that's what we're being told North Korea is saying. And we do need to be very, very careful because, as I've said before, there is a tremendous concern over the use of a false flag to get the war going. And we know that we cannot trust what is in the corporate media attributed to foreign leaders. The classic example being back when they were out there claiming that Iran's Ahmadinejad said we're going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And those who actually speak the language said, no, that isn't what he said. He said Israel will eventually vanish from the pages of history, which is a far more passive expression. And as it turned out, much of the Western media gets their translations of Middle Eastern media through an organization called MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, which, as it turns out, is an instrument of Israeli propaganda. And they provide these free translations to the Western media. The Western media pick them up and they run them, not realizing or maybe not caring that these translations are very often mistranslated or spun or interpreted in a way that makes the Middle Eastern nations look bad and Israel look good. So we have to be very, very careful. Now, as I said before, right now, the last several predictions of North Korea is going to do a test have come to naught. Nothing's happening over there. And so we know that for the U.S. to get the war they want, there has to be an event. They can't just say, well, we're going to go into North Korea. The American people wouldn't stand for it. So there could be another false flag attack. Because look how many wars are started with lies, hoaxes, and deceptions. Vietnam, Gulf of Tonkin, USS Maine, Spanish-American War, the Lusitania, World War I, Pearl Harbor, World War II. The reality, the official story was never real in all of those. It's all manipulation here. We should be on guard against it happening yet again. Now, as I said before, the South Korean-U.S. drill, in theory, ends later today. On the other side of the international date line, it's already Friday. It's still early in the morning over there, but supposedly it's the last day of those exercises. All right, let's take a phone call. Dave in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. Aloha, Mike. Hey, how are you doing, brother?
Doing okay.
Man, I just got to tell you, you have become my favorite talk show host, and I want to tell you why. I think your audience will agree with this. Number one, you're an encyclopedia, and you have no detectable agenda except liberty and the truth. And I love how courteous and kind you are to your callers. You hear people out. You don't interrupt them. You are just a dynamite at your job, and I really appreciate you and your crew. That's number one. Now, I want to get into something. I'm a truck driver, and so I listen to you. I listen to your previous day's broadcast on YouTube when it's uploaded because I'm typically multitasking throughout the day, so I don't really get a chance to tune into you live. So I always catch your previous day's show. Well, there was a caller on, I believe it was day before yesterday, and I've got a lot of insight into this, and so I'm going to try to be brief. I realize I don't have a lot of time, but I met Hillary Clinton in 1986 in the Walmart general office in her capacity as a Walmart board member. A lot of folks don't realize Hillary Clinton was given a lifetime seat on the Walmart board of directors by Sam Walton to purchase Bill Clinton's support for right to work in Arkansas at the time, which the money wanted through, but the Democrats couldn't push. And, of course, Clinton campaigned against it in his last run for Arkansas governor. then flipped and codified it in the Arkansas Constitution. So now people can no longer fight for a rightful share of the wealth they produce for their billionaire owners of the corporations.
Okay,
so
Dave, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. Don't hang up. We got to do a break for commercials, and we'll be right back and let you complete your story. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Dave in Missouri, and Dave's encounter with Hillary Clinton on the board of directors of Walmart.
You know, this is the reason that I called you, Mike. I mean, you had a caller day before yesterday, and he started talking about the self-checkouts and how that was going to lead to, naturally, the Walmart shedding employees. And Walmart came in to rural economies 30 years ago that nobody else, the big retailers, wouldn't come in, with the promise of providing jobs and as an American-made company. You know, I mean, you're old enough to remember.
Yes.
You know, if you ever walked in a Walmart store back in the 80s, you've seen the signs hanging up. Walmart has created or retained X number of jobs. You know, that was really big, and Sam Walton was big about pushing that. But Sam was a very he was an astute character. I mean, you don't get to be that wealthy without having two sides to your personality. So he played PR great, but he spotted Bill Clinton. You know, and Bill Clinton was given the governorship by Winthrop Rockefeller. We can't really forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically ran uncontested in a Democrat state, and he was able to do things that no Republican could do. Number one was taxes, and then also right to work in Arkansas. No Republican could have pulled that off. Only a Democrat could have. Reminds me of Obamacare. Do you think a white Republican could ever have signed a law telling people they had to support private for-profit insurance companies? They'd be called fascists and run out on a rail. So sometimes the Democrats are used to do what the controllers want done that they can't do through their other means. So I mean, it really is both hands, two hands of the same animal when you're talking Democrat and Republican. But anyway, let me just say this, and I hate to be so fast, but I've got a lot of information, and I think they're going to really like this, because what I heard from your take in response to that caller kind of left out the understanding, and I hope you don't take this wrong, that, Walmart payroll is 5 to 7%. Now, that means a nickel to 7 cents of every dollar you drop on the counter actually stays in the community in the form of payroll. 93 to 95 cents is evacuated. Well, Sam got behind Bill for the presidency, brought him along because he wanted NAFTA, GATT, WTO. He wanted free trade. Walmart was the first corporate American retailer with an overseas buying office. In the late 80s, we started seeing all this supposedly made in Taiwan junk come in the back doors. And we'd peel the label and it'd say made in China. Well, that was treason. You couldn't buy a Cuban cigar, never seen anything made in the Soviet Union. And we had a principle against supporting the enemies of liberty in the world, principally communists. We just didn't do that with our money. Well, right to work, for free trade, normalized trade with communist China, Bill did that, less than a year after, or just a few years after Tiananmen Square. Suddenly then now China's a preferred partner, and all of our factories flee. You see the biggest transfer of wealth in human history from the American middle class to the communist Chinese, along with our military secrets, building up the budget. So anyway, I met Hillary. I wanted to put, in the late 80s, the supercenters were on the drawing board. I wanted to put an American-made department inside the supercenters to cement Walmart's commitment to American manufacturing in the floor plan of the store. And I'm pitching this to the Walmart board. This blonde was in there. I had no idea who she was. I was 19 years old at the time. Sam recruited me out of high school. But I had great relationships with the executives at that time. So I had a lot of access. And I'm presenting American Showcase is what I called it, among other ideas. And this blonde actually gets up on her feet, leans over the table into my face, says, "Who are you to tell me how to spend my money? Why should I waste my money on your high-minded ideas? You need to grow up and get lost." And then she and Rob Walton, Sam's son, who is now still the chairman of the board, got up and walked out and left me sitting there with two other people I didn't know, who in turn got up and left. I had no idea what was going on at that point, but that got me watching the Clintons. This was 88. That got me watching the Clintons. Then Bill gets elected president, right to work, NAFTA, GATT, WTO, normalized trade with communist China. You see, right to work sweep the country. So Walmart has infiltrated rural markets with the promise of investment that they then have purchased politicians of both political parties, because the whole free trade agenda ran straight through the Bushes too. It was crafted under Papa Bush.
Yes.
So I mean, there is no recourse for the American middle class, and so I'm so supportive of Donald Trump and nationalism. I mean, I have fought for this. So many people have. You have. I'm going to shut up now and let you talk. I just wanted to get you that story.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting story, very informative from somebody who was on the inside, and yeah, I mean, what a way to meet the soon-to-be First Lady at that point. I'm in agreement with everything that you've been saying. You can't have a nation where you have sent the jobs overseas, where the manufacturing is overseas. Sooner or later, ordinary people just don't have the money to go into the stores and buy whatever it is that you're selling. And this attitude, this is something else we can dump on the Clintons, the retail Mageddon, because their goal.
Well, you're absolutely right. And Sam Walton used to say, hey, if we don't support the factories and the towns that we have stores in, who's going to be left to shop with us when the jobs were gone? Those were Sam's own words. And I tried to use that against Hillary. And this is the point I did not make. I was 19 years old and a hillbilly. A grizzly bear, I'm 6'4". A grizzly bear would not have scared me at that point. But that pint-sized woman had something so dark, so demonic, so evil, so queenly, self-righteous. I mean, something inside of her just terrified me. And literally, I did not forget it. I had no idea who she was until a month later when I picked up the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and the First Lady of Arkansas. And I'm like, holy cow. I was a kid. I did not know. But there was something in her, even then, that was so atrocious. I mean, just disgusting, that it literally terrified me. I don't even have words for it. But now everybody has seen that. That's all come out. Nobody can even deny the character of this witch, and both her and Bill was a glad-handing, friendly guy. I mean, if you met Bill Clinton, you'd love to go and have a drink with him, hang out with him. But Hillary, that's a beast unto itself, and thank God that was not put over on this country.
Well, it was to a certain extent here, but Sam Walton's words, I've been saying exactly the same thing. If you offshore all the jobs, if you go to manufacturing, soon people won't have any money to spend in those shopping malls, and that's where the retail Mageddon came from. But again, these were people who were looking at an immediate agenda. We're going to make the Walmart much more profitable by allowing them to import from other countries, and they didn't think the long-term good of the whole nation. They were just out for a fast buck, and that unfortunately is an attitude that has come to infect the vast majority of American politicians. I want my money. I want it now.
I wish I could. I wish I could accept that. I really do, Mike. But I know these people. They are very cunning. They knew exactly what they were doing. The Walmart became the world's largest corporation after that. They've generated more money than any corporation, any retailer. I mean, all of the retail competition combined. So, yes, they knew. David Class, the Walmart's first president, now he owns the Royals. Yes, he knew. The board, yes, they knew. They knew what putting their money in communist China and slave states at the expense of investing in the hometowns where they had conned their ways into retail monopoly, really. They knew what that was going to do, but they wanted the money. They made the money, and they've used that money to insulate themselves politically by purchasing both parties. I know you got to go, Mike. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot, Dave. And in the final comment here, these people may have known the long-term problems it would cause, and Walmart is now in trouble. They're starting to lose sales. Even at their prices, people just aren't going in there. They can't afford to. So we'll see what happens with the Christmas shopping season. But, yeah, it's going to catch up with all these corporations because you can't have a nation that is full of places that sell things and a population that doesn't have the money to buy anything. Because nobody wants to use those credit cards anymore. Everybody's borrowed out to the max. Everybody's trying to get out of debt right now. It really is headed toward a collapse. We're going to switch over to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I call in with kind of a heavy heart because Hillary actually explained this uranium deal before the campaign even started. And unfortunately, the excuse should stand up in any court. What happened was she thought he said geraniums, and she said, sure, why not?
Okay. Is that about the same time she said if Trump gets elected, we'll all wind up in nooses?
Yeah. As far as Robert Mueller, this vicious rumor that he took a uranium sample over to Putin, he did, but he only intended to show it to him. What happened was it fell in Putin's pants. Apparently, Sandy Berger's tailor is Russian, and that's a inherent defect in Russian tailoring. So
I see.
Mueller just told him to keep it.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Now, on a serious note, China has two big problems that can keep them from becoming this world juggernaut. This is serious. Number one is water. They've used up just about all their water for industry and drinking, and in most areas in China, it's not clean enough for either. They've made so many rivers disappear through just unbelievable disregard, actual disregard for the environment, that I don't see how they're going to continue to be some industrial power very much longer. Number two is I heard they signed cap and trade, and for quite a while now they've been laying off people like 400,000 or 800,000 at a time, or they're doing it in steps. So I think they're going to have internal problems of their own soon.
Yeah, they may have grown. They may have grown too fast here, but again, they used to be heavily dependent on their exports to the United States, and that's basically gone away. And yes, they still export to Europe, but that has had a negative impact on the Chinese economy. They don't have the cash flow they had when the U.S. economy was still intact, and they can look at what's going on with our politicians and realize that a consumer economy is not coming back to this country anytime soon. That the money junkies have all the money, the war hawks have got all the money. They don't feel that the ordinary American people should be allowed any wealth at all because that makes them a threat to the existing order. And all tyrants and rulers throughout history drive their populations down to poverty. And it's not just the greed of wanting all the money, it is the control of keeping them dependent on the government for food or for housing or for whatever, and not allow the people any resources with which to fight back against the oligarchs.
All right. Thank you, and you have a good one. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And moving right along here, there's another scandal that's still out there and ready to fester, and that is, of course, that Bill Clinton, Loretta Lynch meeting on the tarmac. And apparently we're now dealing with the revelation that the FBI withheld records that were responsive to a lawsuit from Judicial Watch. And so Tom Fitton, who's the president of Judicial Watch, is now out there saying that, somebody obstructed justice here. Somebody withheld evidence. So we need to find out who gave that order. And we also need to find out what did Clinton and Lynch really talk about on that tarmac, and I'm willing to wager a nickel that it wasn't just about their grandkids and family. Because if that's what all it was about, they wouldn't need to disappear those records. Now, getting back to the world of computers and computer equipment, Canada's Electronic Spy Agency is taking what they describe as an unprecedented step of releasing one of its own cyber defense tools to the public in a bid to help companies and organizations better defend their computers and networks against malicious threats. So apparently they're realizing it has gone out of control. So the Communication Security Establishment is basically out there acknowledging it needs to do a better job of explaining to Canadians exactly what it does. And so today it basically pulled back the curtain on an open source malware analysis tool called Assembly Line that CSE says is used to protect the Canadian government's sprawling infrastructure every single day. It's a tool that helps our analysts know what to look at because it's overwhelming for the number of people we have to be able to protect things. So that's a good idea. And perhaps our NSA, CIA ought to be thinking about doing exactly the same thing. All their bad cyber warfare tools are already out there on the dark web. It seems only reasonable if they have open source defensive software that they ought to just put it on out there. After all, the American people paid for it anyway. It does technically belong to us. And start hardening our systems against all this malware that's floating around, because there's certainly a lot of it. There's certainly a lot of it. And again, we have all these people starting to look at these exploits in the routers and asking, is this in fact deliberate? Was the WPA2 Wi-Fi security intentionally weakened? Because we know NSA has done that in the past, going all the way back to the Crypto AG scandal, which we talk about in our article, Rivero Challenges the NSA, if you want to look that one up. So basically, Crypto AG was manufacturing an updated version of the German Enigma machine. Then later on, they went completely electronic. And the big scandal, this was revealed in the book The Puzzle Palace, was the CIA went to the owner of the company and paid him a huge amount of money to install a backdoor in the product, these encryption machines. And apparently the owner of the company took the money, and from then on, every one of those machines sold anywhere in the world, the messages could be decoded by the NSA. Because in this age of the computers, no amount of computer power can decode a message if the method is not known. And that was the object lesson of my article in Rivero Challenges the NSA. Now, you all have a right to privacy. It's enshrined in the Fourth Amendment. You have a right to secure the privacy of information that is none of the government's business. We're not talking about hiding evidence. We're talking about personal photographs, plans for a new company, plans for a new product, Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe. We have a right to privacy in those things. And if the government won't respect that, we have a right to use our own strong encryption. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at the corporate media here, and they're still going on with all of these irrelevancies. They're still trying to make a big deal over Donald Trump's condolence call regarding one of the soldiers who died in an ambush in Niger. And even the people who are out there saying Donald Trump shouldn't have said that, they're admitting they didn't actually hear the whole conversation in context. But it's just another way to get after Donald Trump. And as I reported earlier in the show, the Washington Post is out there saying that all of this Hillary Uranium One stuff is a distraction, and we got to get the focus back on Donald Trump and Russia. So the entire society is falling apart here. Now, interesting little story. Over in New York, the New York Police Department is in court where a judge asked that they reveal what happened to money seized by its officers under the civil forfeiture laws. And the NYPD has come on in and said, well, we can't tell you. Now, this is a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. And City Attorney Neil Giannotti is saying the police department was unable to find that information from the Property and Evidence Tracking System, otherwise known as PETS, because it's broken. The database is corrupt. They have no idea how much money they've taken in or where it went. Now, this system, this evidence tracking system, PETS, cost the city more than $25 million back in 2009. And the judge, Arlene Bluth, came on back and said, do you want the Daily News to be reporting that you have no copy of the data? That deserves an expose in the media. And the judge is absolutely right because, again, the police department is saying the technicians can't even figure out how to back up the database. They've had this system since 2009 and they weren't doing backups. No, I think what we're looking at is a huge pile of corruption where the NYPD were just grabbing money away from the citizens and they were just spending it. So the computer is broken is becoming a standard excuse to conceal corruption. Remember Lois Lerner's hard drive? The evidence for the IRS targeting conservative groups. Oh, it's all on Lois Lerner's hard drive. Oh, golly gee shuckies, the drive has failed. The drive has gone bad. And we unfortunately recycled the backup tape. So gosh darn it, I guess that data is gone. Now, hard drives do fail. That's a reality. That's why you do backups. But it does seem that every time there's a question about where money came from, where it went, oh, the computer broke down. The hard drive got wiped out. The dog ate the laptop, or some other such nonsense. Really? I thought the NSA was supposed to have all this data. Anyway, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and help Claire get some of her stuff done for this afternoon. So we'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.